All right, here's a little information on a Anschutz 335. This one is actually labeled Crosman 6500, imported to the U.S. by Crosman and manufactured by Anschutz as a sporter air rifle, break barrel air rifle. When I wanted to just go over a few of the things I found out with these, and I haven't been able to find too much online, so it's sort of a not very talked about air rifle. It wasn't very popular for very long, so it didn't gain the notoriety that other rifles ever did, even though it's fairly quality rifle. It wasn't as powerful as some of the rifles at the time, and everyone was chasing a power scenario back then. So I think the Diana 34 and RWS 34 and a couple others, fine work bow, had a little bit more speed in foot pounds, and that's what killed it. That, or just the lack of Anschutz wanting to stay in the market of the spring sporters and wanting to dedicate more to the competition, 10-meter competition lines of rifles that they were working on. So the field sporter per se wasn't as pushed by their company, but the product was a very good quality gun. The air rifle has Anschutz was renowned for their barrels. The barrel quality is bar none, and a nice two-stage trigger that breaks at just over 2.2 pounds 2 ounces. It's a two-stage. Some people don't. When I first got it, didn't have the set screws properly set. There's actually two set points. If you make it too light, you lose the second stage. So here's how it pivots on the sears, and it's fairly easy to adjust. There's online information on that, so you can adjust the two sear adjuster screws. There's one here in the back and one in the front. There's also a nut way in the back that allows for how much sear travel, but I don't believe I even attempted to change anything on that. It's nice as it is. Once it was adjusted to be not so light that it didn't have a second stage. Otherwise, it goes through a little bit of a movement in the first stage. It hits a stop, and then about 2 pounds 2.3 ounces about, and it breaks cleanly. Another thing, this one and others of its class at the time were talked about. There's some negative things online about one fact that I did address. They talked about these, or maybe it was just a few people's had some bad experiences, but it was mentioned on a couple of the forums about the front stock bracket coming loose or breaking off in a couple of people's guns or something. And I could see how that may have happened. It was only tack welded in two tiny little spots on each side. And I wanted to be cautious and address it before anything ever happened. So I had a professional who could do TIG welding put a weld on both sides right above the bracket, as you can see here. And that shores it up completely so that would never happen. Even though it never came loose, I figured better safe than sorry. It doesn't cause any problems in bumping into any of the inletting, the way I had it done, just below the edge of the, just at the edges of the two brackets. Basically just reinforcing it and shoring it up so that would never become a problem down the road. I didn't want that to happen. The other thing I did was I changed out the mainspring. It was an older gun, so at the time I decided to research what springs would work, and I tried a few different ones. I ended up going with a Jim McCary Air Rifle Headquarters product that he had for the Fine Work Bow 124, 127 brand break barrel rifles. He does a short spring design on those that he called the old school kits, and it was a bit shorter spring for the fine work bar 124 used, but it was a thicker wire, and I just used that old school spring. At the time he called it an Arctic spring, and he promoted it as being a spring that even if it was put on loose guides with no lubrication, it had very low vibration. It didn't buzz. So he figured something that he was doing with the alloy of the spring and the post-treatment of the spring caused that type of spring to not vibrate as much during the shot. So I figured I'd give it a try, and sure enough, even with very little spring tar on there, it developed full power to what this gun can produce at its for its model and lineage, and next to no vibration or buzz on the rifle. That, and I bought from, I think at the time, who was it? Oh, from England, from UK, T.W. Chambers. Sells or may still sell or sold at the time. A new leather cup seal. I decided to keep this original as per the gun was designed. It has a leather cup seal inside it. So it's an old historic rifle, and I wanted to keep it original. There aren't that many out there, or at least not in the U.S. anyway, still floating around. So I wanted to keep it fully original in that respect, and it shoots really well anyway. So I put a new cup seal on. Cup seals that are leather should be really lubricated with something that keeps the leather supple and it doesn't combust or cause desealing. One way to lubricate the seals, and I kind of prefer it, is a mixture of neat's foot oil and pure 100% silicone shock oil. It's pure silicone. It's a it doesn't evaporate very easily. It's like an oily substance, but it's pure silicone. And then the neat's foot oil is a leather conditioner and oil. Mix them about half and half, basically, and they don't really mix. They don't stay mixed very long. They kind of separate, so you have to shake it up. It becomes but you want both of those to get into the leather. I usually use an applicator with a needle dropper like this with a bent angle, so I can actually suck up some of the solution and add 2 to 3 drops. You can just practice how far you push this in to get 2 or 3 drops in, right in the transfer port. If you cock the gun, you can put this right through the transfer port and get it inside to the wall and drop it in there, and then you could actually half cock it and get it in there, and then leave the gun like that for standing in a corner for a day or two, and it'll get into the seal. If you put too much in, it's going to mist a lot out into the barrel, so you don't want to overdo it, but probably every tin of pellets, a couple of drops can't hurt. It should keep the leather supple. Every 250 to 500 pellets, I'd say maybe 2 drops of something to keep the leather supple. Otherwise, that way the leather seals can really last decades. They can really go for a long time, kept somewhat moist, so that leather doesn't dry out and crack out. It's able to keep a perfect seal in the cylinder. It polishes the walls. It's just a very good system. Not really made for a high power of today's rifles with the synthetic seals, but in a rifle like this that shoots about 700 feet per second on a mid-grain pellet, it just does fine. It's long-lasting and fairly low maintenance. What else? The sights. You can tap out the rear sights in Anschutz. Very metal, very quality sight on the back side. But if you want to remove it and put, for a while I shot it with an Anschutz rear diopter, which are available online. You can get these on eBay all day long. They're always out there because they were on so many rimfire rifles in the past, so they're pretty common. But that slides right on the dovetails. If you don't want to put a scope on it, it's got 3 scope stops. Put the Anschutz rear on there. You can tap out this little pin and remove the top piece that pivots, and there's a couple screws underneath, and you can remove the rear sight and just go with an Anschutz diopter on the rear or a scope. And the front is a really nice front sight. It actually takes the different Anschutz inserts. It's a spring compression to load this type. You push it in with your thumb from the front and drop it in to the little tabs are at the ends, and then you've got an insert. You can use the round circular ones or others that are available, different shapes or different size holes for different targets that you're shooting at, or the point if you want to do more for a hunting type of a setup with a point. The dovetails on the front of this 335 are different sizes than some of the ones you might see out there. Like, for those of you who like to know different information, the Vyrock dovetails do not really fit. They're too loose. I mean, you could probably crank them down, but they don't have a lot of springing tension in those to clamp down. The fine work barrel from the 127s and 124s is way too loose. It won't fit at all. The ones that did fit was like a Diana RWS 36, or when they had the better metallic, the whole full metal ones. They actually fit perfectly fine, and they would clamp on the front of this size dovetails, or the Anschutz ones, of course. You want to carefully slide it in place and use a gunsmith screwdriver to tighten it up for the front sight. But this one, I love it because it's got basically it's the competitions type front sight versus the ramp and post. I think this is just a much nicer setup with this type of a front sight. You can remove it if you want to get it off of there to put a scope on it, as well as the rear sight if you want to just use it as a sporter with the rear and the front, or remove this rear and put an Anschutz on the back. Again, a lot of different ways to set this up. And it's just a nice little gun. Let me see what else I haven't touched on. Again, use the lineman to determine the trigger pull. You'll fire here in a minute. I'm going to put the stock screws in and put the stock on here. The front stock screws are nice. They actually are Allen screws with a bevel, and then they've got little star washers to keep them in place. It's sort of a Phillips on the back with a fine metric thread for the main stock screw. It's actually kind of pillar bed. It's got a steel pillar that goes all the way through to the trigger guard. So it's a fairly good system basically to lock it down in the stock. Let me just pause it to put the stock on real quick. Okay, didn't want to bore everybody putting a few screws to put the stock back on. Basically, you use a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench to put the fronts in. The fronts are nice. They have actually blued steel cups in the wood. It's a nice touch. The screws that the pivot bolt are actually pretty cool. Not very much done any longer with all this machining, but there's little notches in the front main bolt that have little half moon shapes where the rear nut comes into play to keep it from spinning out or whatever. The other thing this has that's kind of cool is it's got the Walther type lever latch. it's the Walther lever is basically depressing the detent, the wedge detent. You can close it back to battery if you were hunting, you didn't want to make a bunch of noise. You can slam it. You can, not slam it, but close it firmly, and it'll slide over the detent like so. But if you're trying to do it quietly, you can press the detent and close it like so. But the lever comes into play. It latches back down, and the barrel cannot come open or have any play or wobble or whatever. It's just it firmly latches underneath in the main lug inside on the receiver. So for those people that are interested in having a latching type lever, that's how that works. The other type I don't think is as nice. It's kind of like the Vyrock 35. It's the one that pushes in the end. It pushes in the end this way to latch, versus this type. I think this type is a little bit cooler type of a decant. It's pretty quick to compress and to shoot. This gun can't be decocked. If you pull the trigger when it's open all the way, it won't fire. You can't fire it and release carefully the spring. So if you have to cock this, you have to actually shoot it. Putting a pellet in, again, and that's all. Again, I put a new O-ring in the breech seal here, so it's got a nice, the seals have all been done in the spring and everything, and welding on the rear stock procurement or securement brackets. Again, it's a beautiful little air rifle from Anschutz. I tested it. I usually used it the most part. I didn't really shoot it a lot, but when I did, I like to use the diopter. Even I think this was a 7-shot group at 50 feet. This one was with Crosman Premiers, and this was back in 09, I guess. Had a lot of these rifles sit around a lot, so this one I think I'm going to put up for sale next week on eBay. But it's a beauty. I hate to let it go. Again, beautiful group, shooting at, this is a little 700 feet per second plus. These are with opens, got a nice little group there on 10 meters with JSB exacts. This is with a scope on it. Hadn't tried it in all the years. What does it shoot? How does it shoot different types of pellets at how does it group different brands? And JSB exacts, it seems to really like them in single hole group there. I didn't readjust the scope for different brands shoot in different places, but I probably have it centered more. The Air Arms Diablo Field, which is very similar to, looks a lot like a JSB. I don't know if it's made by JSB. I like the JSB head stamp 4.52 millimeter shot the best. Just, but everything really shoots well in it. This RWS Superdomes, beam and ramjets, the Crosman Premiers didn't shoot half bad for a cheaper pellet. Harder to find those, the domed ones. Again, Air Arms and JSBs just shoot very well. Again, a nice little rifle. It's epitome of what a spring break barrel rifle was back in the 80s.